Hello everyone, welcome to the channel Unshackling Sudokus and Puzzles. Today we are going to solve a Hitori puzzle taken from the Logic Masters India website contest Puzzle Ramayan. Puzzle Ramayan is a series of online rounds, usually one round per month, and the name of the first round was Classics. All the puzzles in round 1 were authored by Prasanna Seshadri, who is an excellent puzzle setter and solver. Having given the contest, I found the puzzles really fun to solve. Even though the contest is over, you can try to download the puzzles from the PDF or try solving them using the online link given in the PDF. You'll definitely enjoy the puzzles. You can find the link to the contest page in the description of the video. Also, the online solving link for this puzzle that we are featuring today. Before moving to the rules, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please subscribe to the channel now. Your subscription is our motivation and it will help us to keep going and keep producing videos on a daily basis. Let us move to the rules now. The rules are: shade cells such that digits do not repeat in rows and columns. Shaded cells cannot be orthogonally adjacent to each other, and all unshaded cells must be orthogonally connected. Simple rules. So the first rule states that you cannot have repeating numbers. So for example, if you take, let's say, row 2, there are 3 instances of 2, right? So either all the 2's are shaded, or exactly one of the 2 is unshaded and rest of the 2's are shaded. It can be any 2. For example, this 2 can be unshaded, or this 2 can be unshaded, or all the 2's can be shaded. But there should not be any repeating numbers in rows or columns. And one more thing is, all the unshaded cells must be connected to each other. So for example, you cannot have a situation like this, because these 2 gray cells block this cell, right? And there is no way that it can connect to the rest of the cells. This cell has to be orthogonally connected to all unshaded cells. And the last part of the rule is, shaded cells cannot be orthogonally adjacent to each other. By that, it means that 2 consecutive cells, 2 successive cells cannot be shaded. So this is orthogonally adjacent. You cannot have such a scenario. So with that, we'll start this puzzle. So as you can see, it has a really pretty theme. The grid is 9 by 9, 9 rows and 9 columns. And in the first row, you have a lot of ones. Second row has a lot of 2's. Third row has a lot of 3's, and so on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. A nice theme. And the start is by looking at these cells, right? So can you have this cell, that is a cell between 2 instances of the same digit, shaded? When you have such a cell shaded, let's say row 1 column 2 is shaded, then both of these cells become unshaded and we have repeating instance, right? So which means that when you have 2 instances of the same digit exactly one cell apart, as in this case, you cannot have the middle cell as shaded, so which means it will be unshaded. Let us use green to denote that the cell is unshaded. So using the same argument, all the instances where 2 repeating digits, 2 instances of the same digit are separated by one cell apart, in between we can unshade those cells. So this is unshaded, this is unshaded, this is unshaded, and in row 3 all these are unshaded, right? Same idea. Sorry, this is unshaded, 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 and this is unshaded. This is unshaded because same idea. And if you look at the columns, you have 2 5's here, so this is unshaded, 2 9's here, so this is unshaded, 2 6 here, this is unshaded. So I think we have unshaded all those cells where there is exactly one cell between 2 instances of same digit. Okay, there are no more instances. So now let us look at the rows 1 and 2, because they are close to the edge, and in many of the Hitori puzzles, one of the common logics that you need to see is that shaded cells do not isolate a section of unshaded cells. So for example, you cannot have something like this. So you always need to be on the lookout for a chain of shaded cells which can potentially hit a border. So let us look at rows 1 and 2. Can I shade this cell? Row 2 column 1. If I shade this cell, then both of these become unshaded, which means that all the other ones and all the other 2's must be shaded. So which means that we potentially have a situation like this, right? And this cell becomes enclosed here or stranded here, so we cannot have this situation. So which means this cell must be unshaded. So row 2 column 1 is unshaded. And can I shade this cell? What happens is that if I shade this cell, then both of these cells become unshaded, right? I think I can shade this cell, but let us look at the opposite way. Can I unshade this cell? So if I unshade this cell, then both of these cells are shaded. And now in row 1, exactly one cell is unshaded out of the 4 ones, or all the 4 ones are shaded. But you cannot have all the 4 ones as shaded, because that will close the sum of the cells. So which means that exactly one is unshaded and rest of the ones are shaded. Now because these two twos are shaded, either this is true or this is true, right? If you assume that exactly one of these ones is unshaded, then these two ones become shaded and we get a isolated cell. Or if you assume that one of these two ones is unshaded, then these two ones become shaded and we have the same situation. So which means that this 2 can never be unshaded. So this would have to be shaded. And now these two ones cannot both be shaded, which means one of these two ones have to be unshaded, right? Exactly one of these two ones have to be unshaded, which means the rest of the ones in that row can be shaded. So which means this is unshaded, because orthogonally adjacent cells cannot be shaded. And now we have a sharp logic here. Because of these 9s, you cannot shade this cell, because if you shade this cell, we know that one of these two 9s must be shaded, and regardless of whether this 9 or this 9 is shaded, we have a isolated cell, right? If you shade this 9, then these 3 cells become isolated. So that is not possible. So which means this cell is not shaded. So this is unshaded. So let us look at row 2 again. Can I unshade this cell? If I unshade this cell, then this cell becomes shaded, right? Because you can't have one more 2 in the same row. And now we know for sure that one of these 2 3s must be shaded. Of course this cannot be shaded because we have an isolated cell here, so this would become shaded. And now if you look at this chain of connected cells, they will reach the border, they will hit the border either through this one or this one, because one of these two ones would have to be shaded. Otherwise there will be 2 ones which are unshaded. So either this one is shaded or this one is shaded. Whichever be the case, this chain of cells will hit the border and we'll have a set of cells which is completely isolated or trapped inside. So that cannot be the case, which means that this cell cannot be unshaded. So this would be shaded. So which means this is unshaded, and this cell has to connect to the unshaded group of cells, so it comes outside, it cannot be shaded. So because of this one being unshaded, this is shaded, and this cell has to come outside because it cannot be trapped like this. So this is unshaded, which means if this 2 is unshaded, the 2 in the same column will be shaded. So all these cells become unshaded now. And now we know that either this 7 is shaded or this 7 is shaded. Whichever be the case, this 5 cannot be shaded, because if this 5 is shaded, both of these cells will lead to a closed group of cells, right? So which means that this 5 cannot be shaded. So this is unshaded, which means that all the other 5s in the column and row must be shaded. So this is shaded, this becomes unshaded. And now if you look at this group of cells, the 4 cells inside must come outside to connect to the unshaded group of cells. So this is not shaded, this is unshaded, which means the rest of the 3s in that row are shaded. So which means this is unshaded. And now if you look at this X, right, these unshaded cells will have to come outside. So which means this is unshaded, because if you shade this cell, you form a closed group of cells. So which means this is unshaded, which means the other 4s in that row must be shaded. Okay, we have a 3 in column 5 unshaded, which means the other 3s in that column must be shaded, right? So this 3 must be shaded. So these two cells must be unshaded. If you look at this 5, it has a really special, uh, property. So if you unshade this cell, then in that column, the 5s would have to be shaded, right? So which means this 5 is shaded and this 5 and this 5 will also be shaded. So what happens now is that you have formed a closed group of cells, right? So this group of cells cannot connect to the other unshaded group of cells. So which means that this 5 cannot be unshaded. This would have to be shaded, right? Okay, I see something here. So this chain, right, the chain starting from 4 and 5 will definitely reach the bottom through a connected series of shaded cells. How? Let's see how. So suppose we know that one of these two sixers will be shaded for sure. So if this 6 is shaded, then it reaches the border either through this 7 or this 7, right? If you reach this, one of these two 7s must be shaded, right? So if this 7 is shaded, then it has already reached the border. And if this 7 is shaded, and now one of these two 8s must be shaded, right? So if this 8 is shaded, it has already reached the border again. And if this 8 is shaded, one of these two 9s will be shaded, and again it has reached the border. So which means that this sequence of cells will reach the border one way or the other. It can also, if you consider this 6, the same scenario, one of these two 7s will be shaded. If you shade this 7, one of these two 8s will be shaded, this 8 or this 8, and both of those 8s will reach the border. So if you go through this way, one of these two 8s will be shaded. So either this 8 or this 8, again we have a connected series of cells reaching the border. So basically what I am trying to say is that this chain of cells will definitely reach the border somehow. So which means that if you shade this cell, this complete chain will reach the border and will have an isolated section of cells. So that cannot happen, right? It's really complicated to see that way, but which means that this cell cannot be shaded. You cannot basically form a chain this way, as this chain will reach the border and will cut out a group of cells. So this cannot be shaded. And now using the same kind of idea, can you unshade this 6? I think this is a really crucial reduction. It's really tough one, I would say. So if you unshade this cell, then both of these 6 will be shaded, right? Because we can't have repeating 6. And now this cell would have to escape out. So this is unshaded and both of these 7s become shaded. And now what happens is that this 7 will reach the border either through this 8 or this 8. Both of the 8s cannot be unshaded. So one would be shaded, either this 8 or this 8. And whichever be the case, we have a connected chain of cells touching the edges, and we have an enclosed group of cells which cannot connect to the border, which means that the 6 cannot be unshaded. It's really difficult to see, but I'm not really sure if there is any other better deduction in the puzzle. So if you guys manage to see some other sharp deduction, please let me know in the comments. We'll be happy to hear. So which means that this cell would have to be shaded, and because of which this 4 cannot be shaded, because if you shade this 4 as well, we know that this 2 will reach the edge either through this 7 or this 7, which means that this 4 cannot be shaded, because then we'll have an entire chain of cells and they are reaching the edges, both the ends are reaching the edges, and we'll have an isolated group of cells. So which means that this 4 is unshaded. And now using the same idea, this is a connected chain of cells, and you cannot shade this 7, because either this 8 or this 8 will be shaded, and you'll have a group of shaded cells hitting the border on both the edges, which means that this 7 is unshaded, and that is going to give us a host of deduction, guys, which means all these 7s in that row will be shaded. Beautiful, right? Really difficult to see deduction. So these two cells are unshaded, this is unshaded. All the orthogonally adjacent cells of shaded cells can be marked as green. And now I cannot shade this cell because one of these two nines must be shaded, and regardless of whichever nine, will form a group of shaded cells hitting two of the edges, which cannot happen in a Hittori puzzle. So this is not shaded, so this is unshaded, which means that the rest of the 8s can be shaded. So this is unshaded, and this cell has to come out, so this is unshaded. Because 9 is unshaded, this would have to be shaded. And now you cannot shade this cell, right? Because then you will have a chain hitting two of the edges. So this is unshaded, and because 6 is unshaded, this 6 would be shaded, and this 6 would also be shaded. Beautiful. And now this chain again cannot reach the border, because if it reaches, if you shade this cell, you will have a chain of cells hitting two of the borders. So which means this is unshaded, and for the same reason this is also unshaded. Same reason, if you shade this cell, we will have a chain of cells cutting out some section of cells. So this is also unshaded, and orthogonally adjacent cells can be marked as unshaded. And look at this cell 9. So this 9 is unshaded, which means that this 9 would have to be shaded, right? Because you can't have a repeating group. And now we have very few cells left in the grid. So this cell would have to come outside to connect to the chain of unshaded cells. So which means that this is unshaded. I can't shade this 7, right? Because this 7 can be unshaded, not a problem. I mean, it can be shaded. But can this 5 be shaded? No, right? It is very simple to see, because there are two isolated cells. So which means that this 5 is unshaded, and because this 5 is unshaded, the 5 in column 1 gets shaded. And now this cell cannot be shaded, right? Because if you shade this cell, we are forming two ends of a connected series of cells hitting the edges. So which means that this cell cannot be shaded, so this is unshaded, and with that we have completed this Hittori puzzle. So if you look at the puzzle closely, all the green cells, that is the unshaded cells, are all orthogonally connected to each other, and no two shaded cells are orthogonally adjacent. So which means that we have completed the puzzle. This puzzle tripped a lot of solvers in the contest, including me. So, but it had a really wonderful solve, and hope you guys enjoyed watching me solve this Hittori puzzle by Prasanna. I really liked the idea in this puzzle. It was so much fun to solve. We hope to see you all soon with a interesting Sudoku or puzzle. Please let us show your love by commenting in the under the video. We'll be happy to see and respond to your comments. Take care until then. Bye bye.